least one big one a day. This one here is one of the many parts, many fronts to this fire, the Thomas fire. We've been talking to you a lot last night about it. We're just outside of Ventura heading towards Ojai, and as you can see, these flames are pretty significant, and this is just one of about 5 or 6 other major parts to this fire that are still burning like this. The good news right now is there's no wind, but the bad news is you can see this thing is still burning very strong, in fact threatening homes in a number of places. As we show you this live here, I want to show a quick view of San Diego. A big fire started there today, actually 2 fires down there, and one out near Riverside. This one down in San Diego is the biggest, more than 2,000 acres already. Some homes have burned and 18,000 people have been evacuated. So, Sean, the firefight continues here in Southern California. The red flag alert remains until Saturday.
All right, Adam, thoughts and prayers with all the people there. Hope they please stay safe, and very dangerous, and especially with the Santa Ana winds when they come kicking in, very dangerous. It spreads all over. That's all the time we have left this evening. We are always going to be fair and balanced. We are not ever promised the destroy Trump media. We're different, and we were proven right in that hearing today. We'll stay on the case, I promise you that. Let not your heart be troubled. The news continues. Laura Ingraham in D.C. Hi.
Hey, Sean, great show, and I have some incredible news to share with the Fox viewers tonight. Welcome to the Ingraham Angle. Senator Al Franken's offering a not-so-funny farewell. The man who was accused of multiple gropings and other stuff will resign, but no apologies, no admission of guilt, just accusations, and lashing out, of course, against President Trump and Senate candidate Roy Moore. As predicted, Franken was a victim of the PC lynch mob, but now there's a backlash against the Ingraham Angle for identifying the real cause of his ousting. It was all a cynical political ploy. And a huge development at the Justice Department, a top official demoted after reportedly, as we thought, coordinating with the law firm peddling that infamous anti-Trump Russian dossier. But we begin with the fall of the liberal icon comedian Al Franken and the Me Too pandemic. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Look, Franken really had no choice after most of his Democratic colleagues in the Senate called on him to quit. But listen closely to his statement today.
Some of the allegations against me are simply not true. Others I remember very differently.
Think about that for a moment. He's basically calling members of that Me Too movement liars. But he's unwilling to fight for his reputation. I happen to think this is a bad decision, and I pretty much don't agree with him on anything. And why did his fellow Democrats turn on him so fast and so furiously? As we explained in the Angle last night, the Dems did not suddenly become beacons of morality, wagging their fingers at everyone else because they're on the moral high ground. This was a crass political ploy. Democrats dumping Franken overboard because now that they can claim, hey, the moral high ground for 2018 and pursue allegations against Donald Trump and Roy Moore. There's no due process. If you're accused and you're a man, you're accused, you're done.
This is Venezuela, Cuba. This is every third world banana republic. Let's not have due process. Let's not ask anybody any questions. Let's not have any chance to have a hearing. Let's just lynch him. Because when we get done lynching him, we'll be so pure. We'll feel so good.
The new Puritanism in the Democratic Party, that's a switch. And you wouldn't believe the headlines we got in response. The Washington Post wrote, Al Franken finds unlikely defenders on Fox News. The Huffington Post, almost identical, meet Al Franken's Republican defenders. Mediaite, Laura Ingraham, Newt Gingrich defend Franken from Dem lynch mob. Newsflash. We weren't defending Franken. We were defending the notion that one should be considered innocent until proven guilty. You see, the real story here, what we were warning you about, is this, it's kind of a PC pogrom underway with a nasty political edge to it. They're dropping like flies now. Former Democratic Congressman Harold Ford Jr., he was fired today by Morgan Stanley for allegedly several years ago grabbing a woman. He was trying to take her out to drinks a couple of times, I guess. She didn't like that. And now he's vowing to sue the woman and Morgan Stanley in response, that it never happened. Congressman Trent Franks, this was a bizarro one, he announced today that he's going to step down rather than endure an investigation for having what he called a discussion of surrogacy with 2 previous female subordinates. And that takes the cake. Now, look, we need to be careful here. You, myself, everyone, that we don't get so caught up in the white heat of the movement, the Me Too movement, that lives and careers are destroyed without much evidence and in a flash. And look, there are credible allegations out there. There are creeps that need to be shown the door, no doubt about it. But we also have to be wary of what I call the Me Too flu. The gender opportunists who come out of the woodwork with allegations many, many years later because it serves a political or a personal end. Are any of you getting tired of the sudden explosion of moral piety spewing from those who ended up enabling the real abusers by looking the other way because it was political expedient to do so for years? Me too. And that's the angle. Joining us now with reaction, attorney and GOP official Harmeet Dillon, along with Democrat Capri Cafaro, former minority leader in the Ohio State Senate. Harmeet, let's start with you. I mean, I'm not a fan of Al Franken. He and I have clashed a lot politically over the years, and I found him actually personally quite nasty. But I'm getting a little bit worried about where this is all going, because the Democrats clearly would not have acted against Al Franken if they had had the White House and they had had a decent majority in the Senate. This was so they could tar Trump and go after Roy Moore. I have no doubt in my mind.
Absolutely, Laura. I agree with your comments yesterday and Newt Gingrich's. I think that Al Franken is a human sacrifice on the altar of 2018 for the Democrats. And, you know, look at the leader of the pack, Kristen Gillibrand, who last year was campaigning happily with Bill Clinton, sends him thank you tweets, and thinks it's all hunky-dory. And then when it's expedient to throw the Clintons overboard, which they've done, now they've done that as well. And so I think this whole Me Too movement has been enabled by the fact that the Democrats are no longer held back by the Clinton dynasty, because for all these years, everybody knew it was wrong, what was happening, yet they couldn't say anything because the leaders of their party were the ones doing the offending and the demeaning and the shaming and the blaming and all those bad things. And so now it's a new day, but I think they're going a little bit overboard here. And I'm not sure Al Franken, based on his comments today, is truly with the program.
Now, Capri, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, look, I mean, I think the entire thing is gross, frankly. I mean, I do think that...
Well, what does that mean? Everything's gross.
Everything is gross.
The culture is gross today.
The culture is gross. Yeah. I think this entire thing is indicative of the swamp. It is the swampiest of swamp thing. So, number one, I think that Al Franken is not necessarily on board, but I do think that he did this to take one for the proverbial
But he says he's going to stay... He's going to keep his voice. What does that mean? He's going to keep
That's
his
a really
voice?
good question, and here's why. Because obviously he resigned because the Democrats wanted to make sure that they were, quote unquote, like
clean.
Yeah.
Now now it's like
they're getting the high ground, right? They're getting the political high ground. They're getting the political high ground here in light of the theoretical victory of Roy Moore next week, right? So what happens, number one, if Roy Moore loses? That'll be very interesting.
He's not going to lose.
I don't think he's going to lose. Yeah. But, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, poor Al Franken is trying to salvage his reputation. But what makes me angry is that if people were not called out, Democrats or Republicans.
Roy Moore said he didn't do any of this. Roy Moore is denying this.
But Al Franken denied it all, too.
Right, so he shouldn't have quit. Roy Moore's fighting. Roy Moore's fighting, and I didn't even endorse him, but Roy Moore's fighting.
Here's the bottom line.
Quitting.
But from a Democrat,
he won't stand up to
from a Democrat perspective, from a Democrat perspective, Democrats and myself included say, look, you know, if you believe women, if you believe victims.
Can a woman ever tell a tale that is false about a man? Does that ever happen? Because to watch what people are saying about this, all women are saints, all women are saints, and all men are sinners.
We need to be careful, and we do need due process. But
there's no due process.
There is there's no due process on either side. It needs to be equitable. The bottom line is it needs to be equitable.
This
Democrats and Republicans alike.
This is what I say, Harmeet. A mere allegation. Now, Harold Ford Jr., who I know a little bit, is now several years ago. I guess you can't ask someone for a date more than a couple of times.
Well,
and now that's a violation. You can't. And the Trent Franks thing, I don't know what to think about, but I don't even see how that would be harassment unless it were a condition of employment or part of an overall hostile work environment, which it's not.
And most of the Al Franken incidents are that way as well.
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference between John Conyers, who allegedly harassed a number of his subordinates, but Al Franken doing the, grabbing of the butt cheeks in public venues. There's no actually legally. I mean, you take that case to a DA, they're not going to prosecute that.
I mean, George H.W. Bush apparently is getting Randy in a wheelchair
all the time.
Let's leave that poor man alone.
I'm just saying, if you're going to be equitable, you just said be equitable. You want to be equitable, let's be equitable.
For every offense.
But I'm saying this is going to backfire on women. I know I've had conversations with so many men over the last couple of weeks. Everyone's afraid. Everyone's afraid they're afraid to hire women. They're afraid to travel with women. They're afraid to be alone in offices with women, because if it ends up being their word against a woman's word in this climate, they're done.
But
they're done.
No, but
no matter what.
And that's lovely. But at the end of the day, not only is it important to believe women, but at the same time, we do need to engage in due process. And there is a way to marry those two things.
This is politics. Politics is a different court than the courts.
This is not a court, but that's why it's so dangerous. When it becomes... Bad actors should be removed from office. If you're harassing
Democrat or Republican,
doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with politics, but it has taken on the edge of political warfare, and that's where it's tedious for people. And I'm telling you, it's going to backfire on women. This is not good. Time Magazine, the Me Too movement's the Person of the Year. Well, I wonder what it'll be next year.
Let's make sure it's not the Flavor of the Week, because here's the risk for women. When we cry foul too much, then we diminish the real victims.
Well, I mean, Ted Kennedy, it was the last time I checked, Republicans and Democrats lionized him when he died. And he was a big figure in the Senate. He also had quite the reputation.
I was his intern in graduate school.
Right, and I have
the greatest respect for that.
Well, he actually was very nice to me personally, and I actually liked him personally. But I'm saying, he had his own issues, but going way back to the late 60s, we have to go back to Chappaquiddick. But, I mean, come on. And no one's house is clean here.
Nobody's house is clean.
One thing to change the rules going forward, but another thing to bring up 10-year-old allegations.
I know, 10 years, forget. Okay, John Lewis says he will not appear at a Mississippi, I guess it's a Civil Rights Museum event, if Donald Trump is present.
It's sad. This man is a legitimate, bona fide hero of the civil rights movement, and now he's throwing his legacy down the drain by refusing to work with a Republican who's actually improving the lot of African-American people in his state. So I think it's really unfortunate
the economy's soaring, and it's helping everybody.
Absolutely.
He is a civil rights icon. He has the right to protest, as every American does. I understand where he's coming from, and let him do what he wants to do.
Civil rights for everybody? I mean, I don't get that. I find that very.
It's easy to have civil rights for everybody unless you were denied them at some point.
Yeah, well, okay, so I guess it's all a litmus test at this point. Ladies, it's great. Can I still say ladies? I don't even. A girl,
you can't say ladies,
can't
women,
say girls,
broads,
chicks. All right, broads. All right. Ferocious wildfires are spreading across Southern California, including toward a location where Fox's Adam Housley is currently standing by. Adam, very worried about you watching these flames.
Yeah, this is one of the big fires that have been burning in Southern California. This all began Monday night when we had those Santa Ana winds come through here in really low humidity levels. Good news is the winds have not come back as once feared. Bad news is you still see a number of flanks of this fire. The Thomas fire burning. You can see threatening homes. In this area is just outside of Ventura, between Ventura and Ojai, which is basically about an hour or so north and west of Los Angeles. This fire has chewed up more than 115,000 acres since Monday night in several hundred homes. While this fire burns here in a number of locations, and it's pretty spread out. There's a new fire that started today in San Diego called the Lilac Fire. That one there has burned more than 3,000 acres and several homes. Let me clarify that. 3,000 acres burned, several homes in San Diego, but 18,000 people have been evacuated down there because of the conditions. And as you can tell, these conditions are still rough. This is very steep and difficult terrain in many cases. And a lot of these cities haven't burned, or the areas around the cities haven't burned in a long time, including here in Ventura and Santa Barbara County. So right now, this is the firefight that firefighters are facing. Obviously, not a lot of air support this time of night. In fact, we haven't seen very many helicopters at all. The good news, again, though, to give it back to you, Laura, is there are no winds right now, at least in this area, and they're hoping it stays that way. But again, the red flag warnings remain here in California until midday on Saturday. Laura?
Adam Housley, thank you so much. Stay safe, my friend. And the FBI chief tries to defend the Bureau to Congress today. It was wild. It was an onslaught of anti-Trump bias accusations, plus their top of the Billboard charts singing nuns. We're going to introduce you to them. Stay with us.
The FBI that I see is tens of thousands of agents and analysts and staff working their tails off to keep Americans safe. The FBI that I see is people, decent people, committed to the highest principles of integrity and professionalism and respect.
That was FBI Director Chris Wray responding to the president's assertion that his agency is in, quote, tatters, following all the bombshell revelations we've been talking about of anti-Trump bias by the Bureau's former top investigator, Peter Strzok. And while that hearing was unfolding, Fox News reported another potential conflict involving an Obama holdover. They're coming out of the woodwork, this time at the Justice Department. Bruce Orr was demoted and stripped of his title Associate Deputy Attorney General yesterday morning after the House Intel Committee learned that he met during the 2016 campaign with Christopher Steele, the former British spy who authored the infamous Russian dossier. Joining us now to discuss is Republican Congressman from Florida, Matt Gaetz, and Democratic strategist Joel Payne, who was Deputy National Press Secretary and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's guy. Great to see you both. Joel, let's start with you. There are a lot of people working for this investigation who are political adversaries of the president. And if the shoe were on the other foot, and this was an investigation of Hillary Clinton, and the investigation was stacked with anti-Hillary prosecutors, you guys would be going crazy. We have Peter Strzok in this case, who we've discovered has been sending anti-Trump texts during the debates. He was pretty much at every big interview. What are your thoughts on the status of the FBI now after seeing this play out?
Well, it's interesting because the shoe's actually been on the other foot before, right? If we go back about 23 years to Ken Starr and his investigation, you know, if you do some research, you'll see that actually 4 of his top 5 deputies were all Bush, Scalia, Reagan appointee types. I think actually Alex Azar, who was just appointed President Trump's HHS secretary, was 4th in line to Ken Starr, and he was a Scalia law clerk.
So what?
So my point is you can't invalidate.
Wait a second.
So you can't invalidate. So
wait,
Laura, you can't invalidate.
Scalia, I just got to no, because you cannot equate. I clerked on the court. Now, a Scalia law clerk. By the way, Justice Scalia, I knew him well, and he hired liberals, conservatives, moderates, hired kids from all different backgrounds, as does Justice Thomas. There's no litmus test there. It's about merit. So you're saying that if someone clerks on the Supreme Court for a more conservative, judicially conservative justice, that person should be barred from an investigation?
No, what I'm saying...
Because I wouldn't have a problem with that.
What I'm saying
That's ridiculous.
What I'm saying is that you're asking if the shoe is on the other foot, and I'm pointing out...
None of the people... Alex Azar was in no way, or any of these guys who worked on the Starr hearing, they didn't have this type of internal conflicts where they were representing the other side. That's a difference. And, Congressman, you've been all over this. Representing one party, the White House or the Clinton Foundation, and then you hop in to work for Mueller, and you're suddenly investigating the president. That's a nice little revolving door.
Well, yeah, we've had Hillary Clinton's own fan club investigating her. Meanwhile, you've got these people who bring their anti-Trump bias to the Mueller investigation. Today, I asked Christopher Wray, did Mueller have a standard where people had to agree to hate the president in order to work for him? And Christopher Wray wouldn't answer that question as to whether or not there was a litmus test where people had to bring anti-Trump bias. But time and again, we see instances, and you know what, Laura? There's more to come. We're going to see time and again other circumstances. You didn't even mention Andrew Weissman, who was praising
we did
people,
that the other night.
Absolutely, who were actively defying the president of the United States.
Jim Jordan posed a question today about Peter Strzok to the Christopher Wray. Let's watch.
Did Peter Strzok help produce and present the application to the FISA court to secure a warrant to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign?
Congressman, I'm not prepared to discuss anything about a FISA process in this setting.
What was presented to the FISA court?
I do not believe that I can legally and appropriately share a FISA court submission with this committee.
I'm not sure that's correct, actually.
No, it's absolutely false.
And what the FISA court does is still, you can still have a check on that. Congress can still check on what the FISA court does. You have an obligation to do that. And who submits an application, that's not any type of confidential or classified information.
We don't want to live in a world where the FBI can use the fact that they've submitted documents to a court as a shield to oversight. We didn't get an answer as to whether or not the FBI used taxpayer money to go buy this dossier. And Peter Strzok, who hated the president, possibly was the person who packaged all of this together, brought it to the FISA court, and launched this entire false Russia collusion theory in the first place. It's absolutely ludicrous. Strzok is at the center of all this, and if Strzok is the person who prepared this application, everything else is fruit of the poisonous tree.
I was just going to say that. It was my law school days,
Laura,
Joel.
the system is working, okay? You want accountability. We've got accountability. We've got checks and balances here. You're finding these things out. We have transparency and sunlight.
Why should it be a treasure hunt to find out about Strzok? Why didn't, like, if I were Mueller and I wanted to really preserve the integrity of the investigation, in the summer when they relieved him of his duties, I would have come out and said, we found out something disturbing about a member of our team. We decided to proactively relieve him of his duties. They shipped him over to HR, which is kind of an odd place. I wouldn't have put him there. But nevertheless, I would have been very transparent about it.
It wasn't someone who found it out,
instead of
it was the IG. General.
By the way,
these aren't self-reported by Mueller. These are circumstances where we have to have outside watchdog groups and the Inspector General come in and expose this double standard.
I am happy to be on the side of Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller served tours of duty in Vietnam, has a Purple Heart, has served honorably as our FBI director. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is he is somebody of impeccable character. He's somebody of impeccable character. So why would we assume that Bob Mueller is operating out of...
Because of who he's hiring. Look at who he's hiring.
So was Ken Starr hiring out?
We're going back to Scalia.
Well,
yeah, but look, you have to shift ground because you can't defend these hires of Mueller that are blatantly anti-Trump. So you have to go back to Ken Starr.
Validate the findings of the Whitewater investigation because Ken Starr had multiple people.
I don't even think I was alive during the Whitewater investigation.
We barely were. We're about the same age.
Can I just... Going back to this point, because I'm a lawyer, and this really bugs me that you're trying to make any type of legal equivalency. Ken Starr's team, and I know those gentlemen very well, they happen to be, yes, many of them work for the Bush Justice Department. They, however, did not personally represent people who were antagonistic politically to President Clinton. They were not representing one side and then going to work on the other. That's a conflict, inherent conflict.
But they had political affiliations.
Everyone votes.
That doesn't mean that they can't make fair judgments.
They're not making.
Why would you assume that Bob Mueller would put together people against Donald Trump?
You know why? Because we have Bruce Orr at the Justice Department, who's been relieved of his duties because it turns out of his duty as Associate Deputy Attorney General. Because it turns out he was meeting with Christopher. We're moving on to why the integrity of the Justice Department is being questioned right now. And it's important. That's why Christopher Wray was up on Capitol Hill. Bruce Orr, very quickly.
Well, it's ludicrous that Bruce Orr had this type of access and brought this type of bias to bear. And look, it would be one thing if you had one person who expressed their viewpoint, but time and again, you continue to see circumstances. Orr, Strzok, Jeannie Ray, over and over again, people who hate the president investigating him. And by the way, the double standard is evidenced in the fact that Hillary Clinton was investigated by her own fan club.
Well, we're out of time, Joel. We'll have you back. It's a short segment. Too short. Gentlemen, by the way, with partisanship raging in government agencies, CNN and MSNBC are questioning Trump's fitness for office over a speech he delivered yesterday, and this will fill your heart with joy. The Dominican Sisters of Mary are hitting the top of the Billboard charts with some of the Christmas classics. They're going to join us tonight. Amazing. President Trump has made a landmark historic decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. But that's of no concern to many in the mainstream media. Instead, they're freaking out about whether the president slurred a few words toward the end of his speech and using it to, as they've been doing for some time, question his fitness for office.
He seemed like he was almost hanging on to the prompter.
He's struggling.
There was a struggle happening.
We don't have updates on his health.
We don't know what's going on.
Donald Trump is not in perfect health.
There's no reason why that person should have that ability, and we as Americans don't know whether that person has the physical and mental capacity to function correctly.
We should apply that standard to the media at times. But when Hillary Clinton looked woozy and unstable, remember that during the campaign, and even ended up falling at one point, a lot of them sang a different tune.
I want us to be very careful here, the way in which we're reading her health and how that can serve as a proxy, right, for the way in which we're talking about gender.
Today, the news media lost its mind, and Hillary Clinton's health became the most important thing in the world.
This idea now of attempting to cast doubt on Hillary Clinton's health, I mean, she uses pillows, which is a dead giveaway that she's at death's door.
The double standard is so patently predictable, but this effort to question the president's mental fitness is getting totally out of hand. Joining us now, someone who knows what it takes to command. General Wesley Clark is a former Democratic presidential candidate and former Supreme Allied Commander from Europe, of NATO. And great to see you, General.
Thank you, Laura.
What do you think about that? Now, President Trump had probably some I don't know, some throat or teeth problem there, obviously, when you watch the video. And we're jumping to, from one day he has dementia, the next day he's mentally unfit. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, president's health is a big issue, and it's always been a big issue for presidents.
Do you think that's fair? He slurs his words because he had some bridge work fell.
When Ike was president, back before most people were born here, I remember I was a little kid, he had a heart attack. And he actually had to lay off duties in the Oval Office for a while. And it was a big thing. So there's always been media interest.
No, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
It is.
He obviously had a dry throat or something with like bridge work or something. It's like it happens. It's like it can be embarrassing, but it happens.
But as you said, it's not a double standard. It's the same standard. It's different.
No, they went crazy. The Democrats and Republicans who hated Trump went crazy when anyone raised an issue of Hillary. Hillary was actually falling into a limousine and then disappeared for how long was that? She disappeared for some time. Remember on September 11th? And we were not supposed to talk about that. She actually fell, okay? And that wasn't the first time she showed problems.
People look at candidates and presidents' health. And people that support the candidate or whatever, they say it's no big deal. People that are opposed, they use it.
Yeah, but General, he's going to Bethesda.
It's just politics. You know what Laura, you know what they told me when I ran for office? General Saakashvili, he said, he was my boss when I was in the military. Charlie said, I would support you. He said, but why would you want this job? He said, before you run, people will try to keep you from taking it. When you have the job, people try to keep you from doing the job. And after you've had the job, you spend the rest of your life defending yourself. So everybody understands it's highly partisan. It's always been that way in American history, from George Washington, Andrew Jackson.
The left is in a meltdown over Trump. General, this is what's happening. The American economy is soaring. You know it, I know it. People are more optimistic. Retail soaring. We're reestablishing and reasserting ourselves as focusing on America first. We're still working with other countries. We're redoing some of these trade deals. Things are looking up. And so the Democrats have to go to identity politics, Trump's mental, Mueller investigation. Identity politics, Trump's mental, Mueller investigation. That's your party. Are you proud of that party?
Well,
that's the party.
I'm basically a military guy, Laura. I did run for president. I believe
you could have run as a Republican. I don't even know why you're a Democrat.
But here's
that was ridiculous.
But here's the thing. When I talk to Democrats, and I am a Democrat because that's where I'm registered. And when I talk to Democrats, they say they can hardly wait to run on the tax bill as it's emerging.
Good.
So they've got the tax bill, they've got health care, they've got education. But as an American, how do I feel about it? I'm really glad to see the economy doing well. I'm glad to see low unemployment.
Who's responsible for that economy? Do you think Trump gets any credit at all or none?
I think Donald Trump gets some credit for the atmospherics. I think Barack Obama gets some credit. I think George Bush and Hank Paulson get some credit for blowing the whistle. Yeah, George W. Bush.
Gets credit for the economy?
When it was falling apart in the fall of 2008, in the middle of that presidential election,
the big bailout.
He blew the whistle. And he got his Treasury Secretary, Hank Paulson, did something. So, you know,
are we stronger than we were when you were in NATO? Compared to the time that you were in NATO to today, America was richer back then. We were more powerful as a nation because we were less in debt. China was not as powerful and not as strong. So you fast forward 20 years to today. America is $20 trillion in debt. China is on the rise all over the globe.
Absolutely.
ISIS is still out there. The establishment lost hold of this whole thing. That's why Donald Trump was elected. If things were riding high, the economy was going great, but Donald Trump wouldn't have been a factor. But he was a factor because the establishment never held up a mirror to themselves and saw that they traded our manufacturing away. They didn't take care of their people first. And Donald Trump said, look, I'm not a politician. That's what I'm going to try to do.
You know, it's the way democracy works. When people think things aren't going right, they want to change. Now, we can go back and we can dispute about exactly what happened. If I go back and look at it, I look at it like, how come we had all those tax cuts in 2001, 2003? Because, no, let me finish. George W. Bush, as president, said, I'm giving you back your money. He did, but he did it in the middle of a war. And so we spent a lot of money on wars.
The tax cuts happened before 9/11, remember?
2001 and 2003, two tax cuts. And
so you want the government to take more of our money?
I want responsible, fiscally responsible, smart government.
Well, you're not going to get me to defend much about Bush, but that's a good thing he did. We got to talk about Jerusalem. We're almost out of time.
Talk about the war.
Bush. That's boring.
The war in Iraq was a mistake.
No kidding. And you were for it, and I was for it. You said
I was not for the war in Iraq.
You want me to go through the quotes? You said you probably would have voted for it. Do you want me to go through? Do I really have to pull up my research?
Go through the quotes. I ran for president because the war was not going well.
At the time, I probably would have voted for it, but I think that's too simple a question.
It is.
So did you say that or not, General?
You know why? I would have voted for it because it gave
Point made.
Bush,
you would have voted for it.
Bush, it gave. No, that's not the point. The reason I said it's
we're not relitigating your presidential campaign.
But
this is boring.
If you raise it, you have to give me a chance to answer, Laura. So you can vote for the president to have authority to give him greater negotiating leverage.
I got it.
And that's what it was about.
Jerusalem.
It was about
Jerusalem.
diplomacy.
We got to go. Jerusalem.
Not going to war.
Okay. It was a mistake. You and I agree. You and I agree on the war. We shouldn't have gone in. I was for it at the beginning. Ambassador to Israel, Obama's ambassador to Israel, mocked the heavy breathing coming from the critics of the move. Whose side are you on this? Was it a good idea for Trump to do what he did or no?
You know, it reflects domestic policy and domestic politics for Donald Trump. So it's a good idea for him politically, and a lot of foreign policy is derived from your political base. So it's a sort of a natural move. The question is now, having sort of shaken up the region, can you take advantage of the shakeup? So I say three things have to be done.
Okay, quickly.
Number one is the Saudis have to displace the Iranians in the support of Hamas and delegitimate Iran as the big protector of Islam. Number two is Bibi needs to say that no more settlements until we get the peace agreement, no more illegals. And number three, Donald Trump needs, after these other two, he needs to say, by the way, the Palestinians can have their capital.
I think he's going to have more success than your former boss. General, it's great to see you. And by the way, you're not going to believe what a comedian is blaming President Trump for now. That's coming up. And a lot more fires sweeping through California. And why does the Pope want to change the Our Father? What? That's happening. Coming up.
Hi, I'm Mike Ditka.
And I'm Johnny Bench.
And we spent our whole lives around